Most economists say that uncertainties about the world economy's development in the near future is one of the key problems in the current economic crisis. Which is the key problem in political terms at the international level?
Yes, I would say that the key question today at the international level in terms of resuscitating the world economy is the matter of having sufficient aggregate demand brought into the world economy as a result of coordinated fiscal policies by the major industrial countries. There has been, I think, some progress in that area in terms of at the G20 meeting, there's been some important agreements to try to make sure that the lack of aggregate demand that has arisen as a result of reduced business investment as well as consumer spending will be made up in part by government spending, at least temporarily, and we have to make sure that those programs actually come into place. I think there's also some uncertainty about resistance to protectionism. In a number of countries, including the United States, there is some temptation to impose protectionist policy instruments, and that temptation has to be resisted in a coordinated, systematic manner through the G20, through the G7, and through the WTO. So macroeconomic policy coordination, that's an uncertainty. Protectionism is an uncertainty. Getting bank lending moving again is also, I'd say, an important matter, both at the national level and the international level. So I think all three matters have to be addressed.
I think in some ways, uncertainty is also a key problem for international politics. I mean, if you think about the key problems that the international system faces today, proliferation of nuclear weapons, terrorism, rising states, uncertainty becomes very important. If you, for example, try to think about Iran's nuclear capability, there's a question about what Iran's intentions are, whether they would use a nuclear weapon if they had it. Similarly, we don't know about China. We don't know what China wants to do with its economic development, how much it wants to spread its influence. So it seems to me that dealing with uncertainty is just a necessary part of international relations. Now, if you look at the financial crisis, the uncertainty has to be addressed in terms of confidence, right? So governments have tried to instill a certain degree of confidence in markets and in economic actors that, in fact, they have control of the situation. And that is precisely what governments try to do and will have to continue to try to do in the political arena as well. Convince both their own publics and the international community generally that they have a handle on a problem so that the problem doesn't simply take on a life of its own.
And so, which is the best way to face the problems you have identified?
Yes, I would say that in terms of international coordination, I think the G20 exercise or experiment is one that is worth pursuing further. There are quite a few different kinds of countries in the G20, from China and Brazil and India on the one hand to the traditional G7 countries on the other, the advanced industrial countries. And so I'd say that to reinforce the efforts of the G20, it will be important for the G7 countries to have very close coordination through their semi-annual meetings as well as through direct communications. There's some very interesting reporting on there's still a lot to be done, I think, by national governments, including the United States and Japan and Germany. And I think there's some interesting opportunities for further contributions by the European Union. There's been some interesting commentary in the Financial Times by a German commentator, Mr. Munthau, who has suggested that the European Union Commission hasn't been as active, and the Council of the European Union has not been as active as one might hope. So I think there's some opportunities for the European Union to do more. The ECB has been very good, but there's still some room for the EU to be working on making sure we have adequate aggregate demand. And I think that should be complemented, of course, by the G7 and, where possible, the G20.
I think probably the best way to face this problem today is through various multilateral coordinating mechanisms, because one of the things that gives people confidence both within countries and across them is the idea that their government is working with other governments. Okay, when a government goes it alone, it tends to increase anxieties, especially if it's a powerful government like the United States abroad, but also at home as well. The American people, for example, are very confident in American policies when they feel that other states see the problem the same way the United States does. So in that sense, I think the Obama administration has taken an important first step in trying to work multilaterally. The challenge will be in working multilaterally when your partners don't agree with you. That becomes a lot harder, and in those instances, on a case-by-case basis, the administration is going to face the hard choice of whether to go it alone to do what he thinks is right for the United States, or to defer to the multilateral consensus. And he has not been tested that way yet, but it will happen fairly soon.